So you may have heard about Max Blumenthal being arrested. Max Blumenthal, the independent journalist for the Grayzone. He's a wonderful writer and he's an excellent journalist and apparently a very nice person as well. Anyway, so he, in a SWAT-style raid, this is from the Mint Press News, in a SWAT-style raid on the home of government critic and journalist Max Blumenthal, signals a new level of escalation in the US government's war on dissent. Max Blumenthal, the editor of independent media outlet The Grayzone, was secretly arrested on October 25th in a SWAT-style morning raid on his Washington, D.C. home. He was held in D.C. Central Detention Facility for 2 days incommunicado without the ability to communicate to the outside world, having been refused a phone call. He claims to have been shackled by his hands and ankles for some time and kept in a series of cages and cells. Blumenthal was arrested on a 5-month-old assault charge stemming from an incident that took place during the D.C. Venezuelan embassy siege. A Venezuelan opposition supporter, Naylet Pacheco, claims that Blumenthal kicked her in the stomach several times during a conflict between the embassy protectors and supporters of the opposition leader Juan Guaido, who proclaimed himself president of Venezuela in January. At the time of the incident, the Grayzone was publishing a series of investigative reports and news updates that contradicted the Trump administration's narrative, noting how much of the supposedly grassroots uprising was in fact funded by Washington, and exposing the corruption and violent tactics of opposition members. The warrant for the charge had initially been rejected. It was, however, revived later without Blumenthal's knowledge. Quote, "If the government had at least told me I had a warrant, I could have voluntarily surrendered and appeared at my own arraignment. I have nothing to fear because I am completely innocent of this bogus charge," he said. Instead, the federal government essentially enlisted the D.C. police to SWAT me, ensuring that I would be subjected to an early morning raid and then languish in a prison for days without even the ability to call an attorney, end quote. And it goes on about a war on dissent. Now, I won't read all of this, but I'll just read a little bit more, and this is something to be very concerned about, and I'm not surprised really that this has happened to Max because the Grayzone has been doing such amazing reporting on Venezuela, all throughout Latin America. They've interviewed Nicolas Maduro. They've been reporting on the National Endowment for Democracy. They've been doing amazing reporting, and Ben Norton and Anya Parenpil, Dan Cohen, various people working with Max on the Grayzone, just doing wonderful reporting. And so this is not surprising that this has suddenly happened. Excuse me, my phone is bobbing up and down with the wind. It's not surprising that this has happened, and I'm amazed it took so long, really, because not only has Max, he's an author as well, and he's written The Management of Savagery, which he's received a lot of problems from. He's been smeared by the mainstream media because they're really basically jealous that Max Blumenthal is actually he's doing real journalism. He's not a stenographer for the national security state, the military-industrial complex, and so on. He's actually doing real journalism, and The Management of Savagery is an excellent read. Excellent work. And he's also done a book, Goliath, about Israel. I haven't read that one. It's about Palestine and Palestinians' plight. And I have yet to read that. I have the book, I just haven't read it. But anyway, he's an amazing author, and he's an amazing journalist. So this is how the US empire treats journalists that are doing real journalism instead of just being stenographers. And this is, basically what's coming, the beginning of not even the beginning of the persecution, but this is just another example of the persecution of real journalists and the crackdown on press freedom. It goes on, and it says, when asked for comment, political comedian and TV show host Lee Camp told Mint Press News that this was the latest example of the government trying to silence dissenting opinion and controlling the media. This, quote, "This is the continued descent into a fascist state. When the US government is arresting journalists in dramatic fashion, clearly because their reporting is threatening to the power elite, then what else can one call it?" End quote. Corporate media largely applauded US-backed regime change efforts in Venezuela, refusing to even call them a coup, and instead preferring to frame them as a people's quote-unquote uprising, taking the same line as the Trump administration that they claim to quote-unquote resist. Many of those same media outlets have begun to partner with the government in a stated effort to fight fake news. The primary consequence of which has been to undermine and reduce the reach of alternative media, a vital counterweight to the corporate message. In response to a call to arms in the Washington Post, algorithm changes to Facebook, Google, YouTube, Bing, and others have led to independent news sites being deranked, disincentivized, and sometimes deleted. Despite his ordeal, Blumenthal has still been treated better than others who ran afoul of the US government. Chelsea Manning is still held in prison. Edward Snowden, and by the way, Chelsea Manning is being fined for, by the time she gets out of prison again, this will be the second time she's been, the third time really. The first time was 7 years, and then she was pardoned by Obama, pardoned in quotes. Second time she was put to try and basically get her to testify against Assange, and that was against her, her First and Sixth Amendment, she said, in the Constitution. And then they've done it again, and now she's looking at $400,000 worth of fines when she gets out. They're trying to coerce her into testifying against Julian Assange, who, by the way, is pretty much dying in Belmarsh prison in the UK. My government, the Australian government, has abandoned Julian Assange, and he'll either die before he gets to the US on that extradition charge under the Espionage Act. He'll probably die either before he goes or shortly after he arrives in the US. So that's the state of how the US empire is vilifying and smearing and torturing and basically harassing publishers and whistleblowers and journalists. And Max Blumenthal is just another example. So I'll go back to just this. Chelsea Manning is still held in prison. Edward Snowden is in exile, while Julian Assange, whose conditions in solitary confinement is deteriorating, faces a uncertain future, highly uncertain future. On Assange, mainstream media largely applauded his April arrest, describing it as, quote, long overdue, end quote, Washington Post, and, quote, unquote, satisfying Saturday Night Live, detention of a, quote, unquote, anti-American, National Review, quote-unquote narcissistic, Washington Post, quote-unquote internet troll with a outsized view, quote, outsized view of his own importance, end quote, The Times, leaving his quote-unquote voluntary confinement, the Daily Beast, to finally, quote, face justice, end quote, the Daily Mail, for his quote-unquote indisputable crime, New York Times. I mean, this is the mainstream media for you. That's how they describe Julian Assange. I mean, these people don't realize that the next, that first they came for this person, and then they came for that, and I said nothing, and then they came for me. Well, this is what's going to happen with these people in the Washington Post and all these various things. Do they really think they're immune from, if they happen to upset the national security state, that they're going to be next, that they're going to be extradited from anywhere in the world? Like, Julian Assange is not even a U.S. citizen. I mean, it's unbelievable that this is happening to him, and that my government is doing nothing about it. They're just leaving him to the wolves. And I think eventually he actually will die. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that he is so weakened and sick now and they want him dead. They want him to die. And who knows, if they're giving him drugs that are making it very difficult for him to speak properly. He was very kind of confused in court and said he was having trouble thinking. This is a man with a towering intellect, and you don't have to like him to be supportive of him. If you support press freedom and democracy, and you have to have a free press to have a democracy, then you have to support Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning and people like Max Blumenthal. And I would invite you to, if you haven't already, join Patreon and support Max Blumenthal and the Grayzone, their work. Because if we don't support their work, if the public doesn't support it, and then, we're in trouble. We need free, independent journalists to report what's really happening. Anyway, so you can read the rest of that if you wish. It's from the mintpressnews.com, and it's a good essay. and it goes through the various issues, and it has different tweets from people. It's by Anne McLeod, who's a Mint Press News contributor. And the title is Arrest of Government Critic and Journalist Max Blumenthal Signals Escalation of War on Alternative Media. Anyway, so that's all I really wanted to talk about, really. I haven't been able to do many videos lately because I've been so busy, and also it's spring here and summer, so I also have a lot to do on this property. So, but that's something that I've been wanting to do and mention for about a week now, a few days anyway. And so I invite you to please support Max Blumenthal on the Grayzone. Just look for the Grayzone on Patreon. Also, Moderate Rebels is also another thing that Max Blumenthal and Ben Norton do together. Moderate Rebels podcast, and there's other podcasts too that are important to support. Media Roots Radio with Abby Martin and Robbie Martin, her brother. Media Roots Radio, and Abby Martin's an amazing journalist. She's done an incredible docu-film called Gaza Fights for Freedom. So please check that out. It's really great. You can watch it on Vimeo. Then there's The Empire Files, which is also another production from Abby Martin and her partner Mike Preisner. The Empire Files .tv. You can find them there. The Empire Files.tv. What else is there? Anyway, that's all I can think of. But there'll be other. I'm sure there are other people you can support as well. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click the like button if you like the content. I hope to do more videos in the future, although I think it's going to be a while. It's going to be probably at least 2 or 3 months before I can actually do anything more regular than once a week. So thank you so much for watching. My name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.